Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar being hosted by EnterpriseWorx in conjunction with Flowgear, where we were discussing some of the partnership endeavors we've put together with Flowgear, and of course, focusing on what value we can add to your businesses and to your solutions that you'd like to put together. We'll start off by looking at the agenda we're going to follow. We'll try and keep it as concise and specific to what we'd like to talk about going forward. And of course, Daniel's going to be alongside me. So Daniel Chilcott is alongside. He is from Flowgear. He'll have a chance to have a conversation, tell you a bit about himself and Flowgear. Myself, I'm Trevor Niemak. I'm from EnterpriseWorx. I'm the strategic business and product manager for EnterpriseWorx globally. So yeah, let's move on to the next piece here. Okay. So we are EnterpriseWorx. We're an organization that comes purely out of retail initially, and we've spread our wings into the financial services, manufacturing, supply chain, and insurance environments over the years. And of course, our focus of our business is around data decisions. So our key strength is obviously being able to take our customers through their data maturity journey, and in doing so, we have to be innovative about how we think about those pathways and solutions and the partnerships we have with that. So let's talk about some of our services and then our products around that, what we provide. So the first aspect for us is around data management. And of course, one of the key things we find is that, saying that I've heard a while ago, is that if the data is loved, it tends to survive. And we like that concept because that's what we try to do with our customers. So we're an end-to-end data management organization, and that's one of our key services. Within business intelligence, what we find is that it's a journey that never really ends with our customers. Every time we give our customers solutions in this space, they tend to want more because they find better ways for themselves to improve their business. So of course, we never end business intelligence journeys with our customers, but what we do find is that we get involved in the bigger conversations around data governance, and that leads to more and more services that we have to derive. And it talks to what we want to display today around what are the useful tools that help facilitate and make this conversation easier for us. Within the application development space, we have a fairly large team working with some fairly large customers in that space, but much of which we actually can't talk about on this webinar, unfortunately. So we'd have to jump to the next piece there. Within EnterpriseWorx stable, we have some key products, and four of them will sort of talk to you, and then something that we're doing that's custom alongside Flowgear that we'll show you a little later on. But our key sort of flagship products are Connected SQL, and one of our key customers that we deploy this to is Mr. Price Group. And there's some functionality that's based on that in terms of synchronization and centralization of data, as well as being able to automate some of your DBA functions rather than having to have multiple DBAs sitting in your site. One of the biggest installations of Connected SQL encompasses 23,000 instances of SQL, where we centralize all of the data around that, as well as the administrative functions for that. RetailWorx, which is more an offering, one of the key customers there is the Safari and Outdoor Group, where we talk about being able to handle all of your analytics and insights in that space. Another one, which is a fairly big offering, is our FinWorks offering, where We deal with all of the financial reporting. So from your income statement to your balance sheet, cash flow, budgeting, and being able to even drill down from your GL into your sub-module. And a lot of people that would be doing financial reporting would be able to understand that it's really difficult to tie the 2 points up coming from a GL down to understanding what actual GRN caused this purchase price variance, for example. And we make that really simple. Click of a button, drill down, and you get all the way to that sub-module. One of another key offerings that we have with one of our big customers, AB InBev, is segregation of duties. And they use this tool on top of all their SYSPRO installations throughout Africa and India, where we know that their ERP doesn't cater for the big ERP type scenarios like governance, risk, and compliance with SAP. So what we've had to do is build out some functionality around segregation of duties, visualizing that, and being able to then expand on that conversation. We're currently talking with Flowgear as to how we look at, for example, identity management in that space and being able to make this a fuller blown type solution. So as it stands, these are some of the key offerings from EnterpriseWorx at the moment. But what I'd like to do now is give Daniel a bit of a chance to talk as well, and take us through what is Flowgear firstly.
Well, thanks, Trevor, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's great to be able to present this with you. We've had some great discussions over the past week or so, particularly as Trevor mentioned around the segregation of duties solution, and certainly some interesting stuff that EnterpriseWorx is working on there. I think one way to position us is if EnterpriseWorx is about giving you solutions sitting on top of your data, then Flowgear is about getting the data to where it needs to be in order for that to happen. And so that's really what we're about. If you think back to how businesses were run a couple of decades ago, you tended to have these monolithic ERPs that sort of did everything all in one, and there was, customization after customization added onto them. And we've moved a long way away from that. And in large part, cloud has been an accelerator for that. So all businesses have a much larger number of systems that they need to engage with, and they no longer have the ability to easily forklift data at like the database level. If you're using a cloud service, you have to work through the API. And so you've got all these different modes for connecting into data. That's what we try to unify for you. Really two sides to it. One is syncing data with your internal systems, and then the other is engaging third parties as well. And that would be things like upstream vendors or downstream customers or partners. So the Flowgear platform is a single platform that gives you one place to build and manage integrations that connect across different apps and services, as well as third parties, regardless of the underlying tech and mechanisms that are needed to achieve that. Now, of course, no one invests in a platform like this just because of a bunch of features. What you actually want is to achieve some value for your business. And so these are the kind of 4 key things that you'd be looking for in an investment of Flowgear. I think first, most obvious thing, starting with the kind of low-hanging fruit, is that you can use our platform to automate repeat recurring tasks that perhaps don't have a lot of ambiguity around them. They're kind of these really rote processes. And yet if someone is having to manually do that, there's margin of error that might be associated with that. And certainly there's a delay in getting that data captured into the target system. As you allow people to pivot out of those roles where they are doing this kind of mundane data capture, you're able to allow them to move on to higher value tasks. So they're actually providing more value to the company as a result of that. And over time, as your strategy around integration evolves and it starts to encompass more and more of the systems that your business depends on, you overcome that natural kind of siloing effect on data, where if you take a record like customer, there might be a view of that in your ERP. That's the one the finance people have. There'll be another view sitting in CRM. That's the one that your sales folks have. And then perhaps there's another one in your ticketing system or your warehouse system. And again, there are different departments that have that view. But over time, if you can kind of consolidate that and build a single source of truth that multiple departments have access to, that's incredibly empowering and allows your teams to work more effectively together. Over time, what this translates into is a competitive advantage. If you're able to move faster, you're able to get orders processed internally more quickly, maybe you're able to operate in your warehouse more effectively, perhaps there's efficiency around routing for deliveries, and depending on your business, these efficiencies could be extremely varied, but they ultimately translate into a competitive advantage. And that's really what Flowgear gives your business. So one of the challenges that we have is, you're going to see some front end today that Trevor's put together for this demo, but our product doesn't really have front end. Once you've built the integrations, which I will show you, but once they're built, there's not a lot to see. Data just kind of shows up in the right place at the right time. And so to make it real, here are some illustrative examples of what the platform can be used for. For example, you might have multiple different branches in different geos, maybe different countries, possibly running different point of sale systems or different ERPs, where you can use Flowgear to roll up that disparate data into a unified format. And regardless of what it is, it might be finance data, it might be sales information, it might be inventory data for stocking and sort of resupply. Another example is a deep integration between your ERP and your WMS. You might have a WMS that has some pre-built integration into your ERP, but Flowgear will allow you to take that much further and accommodate the specific nuances of how you want to run your warehouse that the pre-built integration perhaps doesn't accommodate. And maybe to take one other example, a sync between CRM and ERP is a pretty common one. So your salespeople have closed an order, that order's been approved by the customer, but you need to get that integrated into ERP so you can raise invoices, deal with stock allocations, collect payments, and so on. So these are just some examples, but literally any products that you're using in your business, Flowgear can automate moving data between them and changing that data into its relevant form in that target system. Now, just about every business that's been around for any number of years has got some kind of automation in place. And very commonly, if there hasn't been a specific strategy that's been adopted, it comes in the form of hand-coded integrations. And these can start life as very kind of lightweight scripts that are thrown together in kind of any scripting language, or perhaps if it's a little bit more formal than that, it was a software development exercise to go and build out these integrations. So what is the point at which you consider whether you need to move from a hand code to a no-code platform such as Flowgear? I think that there's a few things to bear in mind here. The one is that maintaining hand-coded integrations over time actually becomes quite difficult. They're not really built out the first time with a view to longevity. So they kind of solve a problem immediately, but if the vendor upgrades the APIs for the product, then they're likely to become brittle and break. And so there's an ongoing maintenance that's required. Now, if you're not a tech company and you don't have developers or technical folks on staff, it's perhaps something that they're actually not able to maintain. And so it's an outsource exercise, and it's a reactive outsource exercise every time it breaks. You don't have the systems in place to understand that upgrading product B is going to break integration D and so on. And so you tend to find that there's a problem, there's already a tremendous amount of urgency, and now you need to work with an external vendor to have that problem fixed. So you want to kind of flip from this reactive strategy to being able to be proactive around integrations and have a platform that will kind of manage all of that for you. And that's especially important where you've got integrations that are running kind of business critical operations. If teams aren't able to operate because of an integration breaking, that's extremely disruptive. Another thing that Flowgear will give you is the ability to actually see what's going on in these integrations. So a hand code solution, whether it's a full-blown program or just some scripting, still requires a certain level of technical expertise to understand. Department heads are not going to review that script and figure out whether it's doing what they think it's doing, right? But what Flowgear will allow you to do is look at the design visually. So even if you're not confident to make the changes in the integration, you can at least have a much deeper assessment of how that integration is behaving and whether it's in line with the rules that you believe need to be implemented, or you can evaluate how a new feature or a business logic change could be implemented. And then finally, the fact that we have pre-built connectors for many different products, I'll get into some of those just now, means that you don't have to build from the ground up. So you're using this product connector that's already a very high-level abstraction over the underlying APIs. You don't need to get into the woods around any of that. Now, there's really two categories of solution that Flowgear will help you build out. One is called iPaaS, bit of a mouthful. The other one is RPA. iPaaS is a Gartner term. It stands for Integration Platform as a Service, and it's really an integration platform that's delivered as a cloud service. And so the idea is that It's run on a subscription basis. You don't have to deploy anything into your on-premise environment. You don't have to manage patching and uptime and high availability and backups and so on. But iPaaS platforms are mainly going to allow you to engage with structured data sources, things like databases and files and APIs, and usually are going to give you the ability to build those integration processes visually as well, as opposed to a coded mechanism. RPA is a newer term. This concept has been around for a while, but robotic process automation is kind of the latest evolution on that, often driven by machine learning. And the idea with this is that these tools are able to emulate a human user operating in the front end of an app. And so that's quite empowering, because if I'm an end user and I don't have a software development background, I can click through the front end and show the bot where to click, how to fill in information, and then I can have it automate that process. So if I'm doing a large order capture, for example, I can just kind of record it almost like a macro in Excel and then replay that, but I can replay it against my application, whether that's SYSPRO or another ERP, for example. So Flowgear helps you with both of these scenarios. RPA is great to use for quick prototyping and in situations where you don't have access to an API or there isn't an API. In most other cases, it's better to use the iPaaS side to the platform. That's going to give you a much more robust and kind of greater longevity over those integrations. Now, if you've considered an integration platform previously, you're probably aware of some of the options that are out there. So at this point, I think it's helpful just to contextualize where we best fit. So we like to think of this market space as a continuum, and there's kind of a whole spectrum of platforms, and each of them is targeting a specific demographic. So in this diagram here, we've got citizen integrator platforms on the far left-hand side. These are tools that folks are going to be able to get up and running with basically no technical expertise. They're going to kind of guide you every step of the way. The trade-off to that kind of high level of ease of use is they don't support particularly sophisticated scenarios. A lot of them have kind of a trigger and then an action that you can take, and sometimes you can chain multiple actions, but they don't support a lot of complexity in terms of the data mapping and business logic that you might need to implement. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the more traditional tools. These are enterprise service bus, for example, that you would have seen first coming out in the, say, mid to late 90s. These are tools that install into the customer environment. You're generally responsible for maintaining them, patching them, high availability, backups, and so on. They're extremely powerful, but they're normally very heavily script-driven. And so the skill set that you need is much more advanced, almost a developer skill set to be able to work with those tools. Now, where Flowgear fits in as an iPaaS platform is it's somewhat differentiated from many other platforms. A lot of our competitors have gone after the enterprise space. There's a couple of reasons for this. Some have been acquired by more traditional enterprise-facing ESB vendors, and then others have just gone there from kind of day one. But the trade-off is that Flowgear gives you a good balance of ease of use. So in almost all cases, what you're designing is going to be exclusively visually designed. And we do that without compromising on the sophistication of what you're able to build. So the visual design allows you to iterate very quickly over the design of a workflow. You can kind of run it immediately, get the feedback. I'll show you this in the demo, what that feels like to use. And then importantly for you as a potential end customer, you actually have quite a bit of agency over that integration. It's not kind of this black box like a coded solution where you can't introspect it. You have no visibility into it. Our customers have access to the design of these workflows. You can put in security controls if you don't want people making changes, certainly not accidentally, but it's not locked away and it doesn't require coding expertise to understand what's happening there. At the same time, you're able to connect across multiple endpoints. So you can have multiple data sources, multiple data targets, and multiple complex data transformation going on. And I'll give you some examples of this in the demo just now. And then importantly, you can also blend cloud endpoints and on-prem. So you're probably aware, if you're using something like SYSPRO, there's certainly a large population still running on-prem, but many customers are moving to a cloud option around that. But even if your ERP is not cloud, you're very likely using other tools that are. So what Flowgear has is tech that allows you to bridge cloud and on-prem in a way that's very seamless without compromising anything from a security perspective. I think one thing that's probably notable as well is our commercial model is very different to anyone else in the market. And we took a number of years to come right with a model that we actually felt okay with. We flipped this out for many years before we settled on this. One of the problems in this space is how do you price something? Because ultimately you need to understand what a customer is going to need in terms of workload. But if you're selling them hardware resources like CPU and memory, well, how does the customer have any concept of what that's actually going to mean, how much you can run on that? Another scenario that's very common is pricing based on the specific connectors that you need. And so although that gives you kind of a low entry point, by the time you've added 10 connectors, your price is kind of 5x what you anticipated, which we kind of feel is unfair as well. And so what Flowgear works on is this model of active workflows. And that is to say that each subscription that we have available entitles you to a certain number of workflows that can run concurrently at any given point in time. So you can build 1,000 workflows and you can control which subset of those workflows are active at a point in time. And we feel this is a very fair way to kind of exchange value. So it allows you to do a lot of R&D. There's no cost to that. You've got access to all of the connectors on all of the plans. So you're not held back with anything. But only once something has reached a state where you're okay to put it into production, that is the time at which it would now contribute to your overall active workflow count and potentially require you to look at a different subscription. So it gives you a low entry point, access to features and capabilities, and certainly all the connectors, and then to scale up over time as it suits you. So just a quick view of what that looks like. You can see highlighted here the number of active workflows. So base plan, 10 active workflows. And just to kind of underline that even on the base plan, you could literally create 1,000 workflows, and you can control which of those are active at a point in time. You're basically trading parallel workflows off. So if you don't need things to run in parallel, you can have them run one after the other, then you can keep your active workflow count down. So it's a very fair way that allows our customers to balance exactly what their level of consumption is going to be. Now we have about 200 connectors available in the platform today. You can see SYSPRO front and center there. That's a big one for us. It's actually one of the earlier connectors that we have, but we do have a large number of other ERPs. CRM is another big category for us, e-commerce, warehouse management systems, and so on. And about of those 200, roughly a little over half are what we would call product connectors. So these are connectors that wrap specific products, such as SAP, SYSPRO, Salesforce that you see there. These products all have huge differences in their underlying APIs and the way that they integrate. And that's part of the value of the connector, is it abstracts all of that away from you. So you don't have to worry with the details of how to integrate or authenticate into them, or get specimen data for, what does an order record look like, or a customer record. So about half of our connectors fall into that category. And then the other half are what we call technology connectors. And those deal more with open standards and services. So you can talk to REST APIs or SOAP APIs or SQL databases or file systems, and you can do all of that generically. We are growing this list quite aggressively. We're adding probably 2 or 3 connectors per month at the moment. And so if you take a look at our connectors page and you don't see the specific product that you're using, feel free to reach out to us and we can let you know if it's on the roadmap or if it's something that would be happy to consider adding into the pipeline. So just before we get into the demo, I think another relevant point here is, given that this is a cloud service, where does it actually live and what does that mean for you, especially if you're a customer dealing with sensitive information? We've got POP here in South Africa, we've got GDPR for Europe, and just generally folks are pretty concerned around privacy and want to know that their data is in a specific territory and how we manage controls around that. So Flowgear is the only iPaaS platform that will give you in-country hosting in South Africa. It's Terrico Isando data center, which is the local Azure data center, is the primary for our South African tenants. And we have an extremely high level of isolation between our tenants in our new platform, which we released earlier this year. So you're completely separated from every other customer. And in addition to that, if you're already an Azure customer, we can even deliver the platform into your Azure subscription. So, and allow you to enforce whatever rules you need around how your data gets processed. We also have a lot of flexibility around what you need in terms of high availability. We have customers on kind of low-end plans. Their integrations run kind of every, within minutes rather than within seconds. And so they don't need particularly high availability, but other customers are doing kind of real-time integrations. We have customers in call centers, for example, where we need to pop a screen within a second or two. onto the agent's PC. And so those are very kind of like high density real-time requirements or high throughput requirements. And so in those scenarios, we're able to get a hot disaster recovery zone for you as well. So if there was a complete data center outage, we can have a failover within minutes to a secondary region. So, happy to unpack that if those things are of interest to you.
This is one of the features I like, especially considering how many hoops we've had to jump with regards to GDPR operating in Europe as well.
Yeah. I mean, when we launched back in 2010, so I think we kind of cut our teeth. We didn't originally use Azure. I don't think Azure was available in South Africa back then. And I must say, we had to retool a lot of the platforms so that it was kind of Azure native. But the level of availability that we've had as a result of that, I mean, you can't beat. A lot of people like to talk about how all these sort of major cloud providers have outages every year. Well, it's a lot less than you would have if you were trying to run this yourself, and certainly a lot less than our average customer sees even in their own local environments every year. So yeah, I think running on kind of a top tier host or data center provider like that, coupled with the fact that everything stays in territory, is very appealing to our customers and partners. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the platform. We've got two sort of demos here. I'll run the first one, then Trevor's going to jump in on the second bit. So just to give you a little bit of context of what the platform feels like to use, we're going to do a very simple integration where we pull order information out of Salesforce. We use Flowgear to translate that. Obviously, the order coming out of Salesforce is a different shape. The fields are different. The schema is different. And we reshape that into the schema that is required by SYSPRO, send it on, and we'll just take a quick look in SYSPRO and see how that order showed up. So let's go across into the canvas. All right. So here we are in the design canvas, and this is what the workflow area looks like. So we've got a bunch of steps going on. I'll give you a quick overview of the kind of gross steps here. So first of all, we're querying Salesforce for orders. That's the first step over here. This is going to get a list of orders in a particular status for example, like a new status. Then we're going to take that content and we're going to remap that into the shape that SYSPRO requires in order to create a sales order. Then we're going to run the SYSPRO stage. Once we've done that, we're going to look at the response that SYSPRO gave us back. And this is an if statement that figures out whether it was successful or not. If it was successful, we tag it as such. Otherwise, if there was an error, then we tag the error as having occurred as well. Let's just get a login here. All right, should have done it. All right, so a couple of things I want to point out is Flowgear gives you the ability to obtain all of the sample data that you would need generally without having to go to any of the vendors' documentation or their like a third-party developer portal. So for example, if I take a connector like SYSPRO, I can go into this choose sample area over here. And this will come up with a list of all of the different interactions supported by the SYSPRO connector. If you're familiar with SYSPRO, you probably recognize some of these names. These are obviously wrapping their API, which is called e.net. And I can filter for those samples. So for instance, if I want to post a sales order, I can choose the sales order import business object, as SYSPRO refer to it, load that onto the screen. And then if I drill into the data, I can see on the right-hand side a tree view of all of the different fields that are declared inside this object. And as I hover these, it actually gives me a tooltip. I'm not sure if this will show up in the shared screen here, but there's a tooltip coming up showing me all of the documentation around that field. So very easy for me to assess the purpose of that field. And if I want to stub out a specimen order, I can just kind of tick on a bunch of fields here. And as I do that, it builds out a stubbed structure for me. And what I can do from there is just run this step in isolation. So I'd hard code a customer, hard code a product code, try and run it. And it'll come back to me with some logs, and either it's successful or it's not. And if there's an error, I'll use that. Maybe it complains about the product class being required. And I can go back in here and add the product class field and then repeat that process. So it's a very kind of iterative process where over a very short period of time, you're able to get to a structure that is working effectively. Now, one of the key stages that we have is the ability to map data from source to target. So if you have a look at this mapping stage here, this is a product component called Quick Map, and it's looking at the results that we get from Salesforce. That's denoted by this data flow line here. That becomes the input into the map. And then the result of that map gets injected into SYSPRO. So we're taking a Salesforce order in, reshaping it and sending it across to SYSPRO. And I want to show you what that looks like. So when I drill into the designer for this, on the left-hand side, I have the Salesforce schema. So this is the order as it is going to be returned out of Salesforce. In the center over here is a very simplified view of SYSPRO order. We just kept a few fields in to make it nice and easy to see what's going on. And then we have a whole bunch of data connectors. So I can take these and kind of drag and drop them to where they need to go to map these fields. You can also start by doing kind of an auto map process. So it kind of maps the bulk of it if you have a large number of fields. And then on the right-hand side here, you can see it's immediately giving me a preview of how that input data is going to be reshaped. So because it's giving me the preview right here, I don't even need to leave the screen. Literally, as I make a change, it'll update that preview for me. So if I wanted to hard code something in, let's say, let's try unit price and add some multiplier on that, for example. Let me just hard code a number as an example. You'll see it gives me an immediate update on the output document that it's producing there. So a very quick way to get to grips with what's happening. What's notable here is this area allows me to put in different functions. So, for example, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to take the quantity but convert it out according to a UOM. Let's try this. So we've got the quantity field. So I can start typing the word quantity and then kind of tab to complete it. And then I should be able to get the number value of that quantity. So I typed NUM there, and you can see there's a function called number value. And this works very much like Microsoft Excel. And a lot of the functions are very similar to Excel as well. So I would say, okay, give me the number value, open brackets of the quantity field, right? So that gives me an update. I can see order quantity 1, but now it's a number. I should be able to just do a multiplication on that, and it'll give me an update on it. And now we have a quantity of 10. So I can work with this very easily. I can use this for string manipulation. I might need to combine or separate a contact name, for example. I can do filtering to include or exclude data based on certain conditions. And then you can also do things like VLOOKUPs. So what's happening here is we have an incoming stock code. And let's just see what it is. There's this product code here. It's this long number on the left-hand side. And what we're saying is SYSPRO doesn't have that product code. So we need to go and look up that number in a table and then resolve it to the stock code that SYSPRO does actually have. And we're doing that through a lookup table. So what's happening here is this stock code's property is my little lookup table. And you can see here, if you look up this Salesforce code, that resolves to BIC001, for example. But in QuickMap, we can use a lookup function, and this is basically identical to Excel's VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP function, where I can say, go and look at this value, go across to this table and resolve it from this column and give me that column back instead. Now, in the example that we have configured here, it's doing that all statically. So I just saved in some examples of 2 product codes that it can map. But when you actually build out a production workflow, you can go and acquire those mappings dynamically as well. So let's say that mapping table was sitting in some other database or some other piece of software. Flowgear could actually query that, get those mappings, and then allow you to apply those mappings in real time. And so the upside to all of this is kind of from one place, every concern that you have around how the data needs to be changed and evaluated for success, all of that's happening in one place for you. So with that, let's go and run this, and we'll take a look at what it's doing. So as I hit the play button or the test button at the top of the screen, it pops out with an activity log, and I can see the specific stages that are taking place. Now, this is what I was alluding to earlier. It's very tactile. So I can go from making a change to reviewing the effect of that change very quickly. For example, I've got the Salesforce stage over here. We queried a sales order. And if I drill into the response, there's the tabular view of the order that came back from Salesforce. And if I look at the mapping stage, I can drill into how the order has been reshaped in preparation for SYSPRO. And then if I look at the SYSPRO stage, there's the order create process, and I can look at the result on that. And we can see here SYSPRO telling me that it's successfully created order 51. And then we've got our evaluation as to whether it occurred successfully. This is telling me it was successful, and then we're tagging it as a successful transaction. And from that, we can use that information to build reports or use it in later workflows. So let's just go have a quick look. Here we are in SYSPRO, and let's just switch over to order maintenance. and we want to load up order 51. Let's see, there's 50.
You're going to have to click maintenance.
I think I didn't copy the I didn't copy the number, and I need the right number of zeros.
Just type 51, it's fine.
Yeah. There we go. So there's the order line syncing through there. So that hopefully just gives you a little bit of a flavor of the platform. I just want to show you what it looks like to maintain a Flowgear integration over time as well. It's all very well to be able to iterate quickly out the gate. But what Flowgear also gives you the ability to do is handle kind of the governance process around how you test things and then safely put them into production. So that plays out in a number of ways. First of all, if I look at the connection against SYSPRO, I'm connecting obviously to a test instance here. And you can see I've got 3 different environments that I've configured. So test, UAT, production. And under each of those tabs, I can have a completely separate endpoint. So I can have a different operator, different company name, so on. Happens to be, because this is all just demo stuff, they're all the same, but you can configure your test account under test and then a separate one under production, and then control which of those is activating when you actually hit the play button over there. What's also happening is as you're making changes, we're tracking the changes to the workflow over time. And this is, by the way, very similar to the way that a software developer would make changes and then commit their changes. So you've got the ability to roll back and see what the changes were at an earlier point in time. So I can go back to the earlier versions and see how the design is changing over time across that. And then layered on top of that, what you can do is use our release management feature. And what this allows you to do is control exactly when a design of a workflow gets to the next environment. So you can see that I've got revision 10 of this workflow sitting in the test environment at the moment. And once I'm ready, having built this out, I can go and promote that into the UAT environment. I can hand it off to my QA people. And then once they're happy that it's performing as expected, they can then go and promote all the way through to production. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a taste of what the platform feels like to use. And with that, I will hand back to Trevor, and we'll get into the more detailed demo there.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That's very cool. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to just talk through firstly a very simple requirement. Well, we'll call it simple now because it's done. But what we had was a SYSPRO customer that has a very different way of handling what is forecasting in their environment. And when you look at the flow of actions here, you'll see that what they have is an expected buying pattern or expected sale pattern based on percentages of a total sale value that a customer commits to. And what we needed was we needed a way to take that information into a front-end application that would then run the logic of transforming all of that information into an actual value-based or quantity-based pattern, and take into consideration all the unit of measure or pallet or case logic, etc., as well as some of the replenishment logic that they have in terms of doctor stock days, etc., and sort of build out that pattern over what is a forecast horizon effectively. By using Flowgear, what we're able to do is give the customer, well, as much as Daniel said this, Flowgear doesn't have front ends, we've managed to build out, which is a fairly simple front end, which would have taken any average developer probably a week to build, but in the space of a day or two, we were able to put together a very simple front end showing the actual percentage-based pattern, how we translate that information into a quantity-based pattern, and then take that information and upload it into the data points it requires from there that allows the solution to then take that information and then churn it through into SYSPRO. And then SYSPRO obviously taking that information, making the logical sense of that information through its configurations, and allowing us to then populate things like the inventory forecasts, things like MRP forecast, and that's allowing us to then directly influence demand and directly influence how we consume. So by doing a further step with Flowgear in terms of this customer making use of things like EDI, WooCommerce orders. We're able to pick up a simple file, do the quick map, drop it off into SYSPRO as a sort toy import or sales order import. We're able to also hit WooCommerce, pull down orders, and drop those into SYSPRO. And the consequence of that is that this customer wants to see their forecast consumed at a order level, because that's a confirmation of the commitment from their customers. And then the confirmation of that commitment going out the door would be the invoicing or the dispatch and then invoice phases of that. What we're able to do is then snapshot those activities and then see every time a change comes into the top end of the solution, every time there's a consumption to the bottom end of the solution, we're able to completely understand commitment, consumption, and what is left in the environment. And what you'll be able to see then as the output of that will be what is our analytics. So very, very quickly, we're going to just give you a little run through. So Daniel, you can pull up what is the actual front end piece of this. So we have, and where we started with the solution was, hey, I've got a spreadsheet. I've got all the logic written in the spreadsheet. So I could pick up a file if I wanted to, which is predetermined by this, and it would populate everything, you know. Or I can go and look at the actual tables that exist at the moment. So if I want to change what is the current forecast in this environment, all I do is I pick up the information. The top half of the screen talks about what is that actual percentage pattern split or that sales split, and the bottom half is the eventual quantity version. Now you'll see the very last line there is a difference, and that difference is telling me that as much as I've got an annual demand and I've got a split over that, what I'm trying to get to is understanding what's the best way to supply what is the demand expectation at the top end. So what we do is we don't allow any change on the quantity side, but we definitely can interfere with the actual percentage ratio splits on the top. And that allows us to say, we need that difference to come down as close to zero as possible. So what Daniel's looking at there is there's a 10% of that in period 8. So Daniel, if you could take that down to, let's say, 5%, and you'll see that starts to come down even further now. And if, as you start to interfere with those numbers on the top and play around with this, you'll notice that you can get as close to zero as possible on your differences. And this is the work that obviously users need to do in conjunction with the customers, understanding what is their requirement and how best we can supply that requirement to them. And once all of that is done, we save those changes. Once we save those changes, it then, so Daniel, you could save those changes. But what we'll be able to do now is we go back into Power BI, where we extract all that information for the customer. And what we did end up seeing is a very simple view. So I can see my forecast over the entire horizon, which is that 12-month horizon for them. We can see where we have order expectations over each of those financial periods. We can see in that current period, we've got stuff that's been dispatched but not invoiced. And we also can see what's been invoiced for that current period. We can understand the percentage taken and what is the remaining forecast. In a period above, have had a bumper period, they've sold more than they expected to sell in that period. Period before that, they didn't quite hit budget. So the drive and the push at the moment is, we've got a large outstanding or remaining forecast for you. We need to make sure we get on. And that is a call to action for the salespeople to get out to the customers and say, hey guys, what's happening? And obviously you've got some nice coaching on the side that sort of enables them to drill down into the actual problem. We can split that out and show you exactly which customers or stock codes or the combination of both is there. And then there's further analytical value to this. But the output of what the customer needs to understand is, what is their current position? Where do they sit within their commitment to that the customers have made to them, and their ability to deliver on that commitment. So that is the extent of that solution from that customer. And of course, we facilitated that with the use of Flowgear to make it nice and easy, nice and simple, and effective as well for the customer. So at the moment, the key things for us is we're a certified Flowgear partner, where we're allowed to sort of implement, design, and sell Flowgear if need be. And with the assistance of Flowgear, who's always available and willing to help us through the processes and through whether it's demos, whether it's proof of values. Flowgear is always available, whether it's Jacques or Daniel. The guys are always available, willing to help, willing to listen, and really patient about making sure they get to the actual solutions. So the call to action for us is we need to understand if guys are interested in talking about a complementary proof of concept or proof of value, if you'd like to call it that. We've got some customers that you can see in the bottom that we've done stuff with, and some of the partners that I listed there as well. So if you're interested, there's our contact information. We're more than happy to have conversations with the guys before just jumping into proof of concepts as well. And of course, we'll be putting this out on LinkedIn and all of our other social platforms for guys that haven't been able to attend and listen today. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Daniel. I'm not sure, Daniel, if you want to add anything further to this.
Yeah, just to underscore that we, in conjunction with EnterpriseWorx, would be very happy to give you a POC. That would entail from our part getting integrations knocked out kind of to the level that I've presented to you today, and ideally connecting into your own staging or test data sources. So we can connect into your test ERP instance and actually show you your data coming back and pull that all the way through to, for example, Power BI. So yeah, feel free to avail yourself of that opportunity. And Trevor, thanks very much for setting this up for today.
Thank you. And thank you everybody else for joining. Cheers.
Cheers.